G'day folks, it's Rob here and welcome to our small little backyard farm. Today's clip is something a little bit different. I'm going to be looking at some of the pests we have around the patch here at the moment. We're in summer here in southeast Queensland at the moment, and along with the stifling humidity and the daily storms we've had recently, we're also having a lot of issues with pests in the patch at the moment. So I thought I'd just bring you along and give you a bit of a look. We actually don't tend to grow a lot of fruiting crops through this time of year, mainly because of a few different pest issues we have. Namely the Queensland Fruit Fly, which can be a real pain in the rear. They're not the same as those little fruit gnats or fruit flies that you see in the kitchen. These guys are a lot more destructive. So I've done other clips on them, so I'm not going to really look at them in this clip. The main problems we're having at the moment is a bit of a threefold one. We're having issues with mites. They've somehow got into my veggie pods. I've had to cut back a capsicum in there. Also two grasshoppers, something we really can't control this time of year. And also an influx of armyworms, as I discovered yesterday when I was down looking at the chicken coop, just getting a few bits and ready to make a start on that. So I thought we'd start up here around the aquaponics to give you a bit of a look at a couple of pests we have here, and then we'll move on down the back and I'll show you the invading army of caterpillars. One of the biggest pests we have this time of year are the little grasshoppers. They've just been mating and we end up with loads of them all over the patch. Even when we had the hoop house tunnel up with the shade cloth over the top and the veggie net, these guys still manage to get in. So they're just one of those pests that gets into every little nook and cranny around the place. So they're having a field day on this Chinese amaranth at the moment. And as I've joked about before in different clips, there's a couple on that leaf there. We don't mind them eating because we can't really taste the holes they leave. But obviously it does destroy a crop if they strip a leaf all the way back like this one here. You know, they don't leave you much to munch on. So it can be a bit of a pain. We also do see them over here on the ginger. There's a couple down in there on the ginger leaves, but they don't really tend to demolish the leaves. So I'm not really too concerned about them there. The bigger issue we have on the gingers and the turmeric are some of the little army caterpillars. I've just spotted this bean beetle on the ginger here. Those little fellas like to munch on our snake beans and bush beans. What I wanted to show you was the damage to this ginger here. It's been done by the cluster moth caterpillar. They do the same damage on the arrowroot as well. While the leaves are rolled up, they have a bit of a chew and they leave behind a little pattern like you used to make in kindergarten with scissors and paper. Doesn't really hurt the ginger that much because all the good stuff is below the surface, all the rhizome that we want to harvest. The same with the arrowroot, but they can be destructive on other plants. So we're just over here at the aquaponics, and this is our Wakanown spinach. It's a plant that comes from Indonesia from memory, and it's one of my favourite salad greens. As you can see, something's been nibbling on it. Now I know we're not going to find any today because I collected them all the other day and I haven't seen any since, but they get attacked by the magpie moth caterpillar. It's a furry, hairy little jobby, and the other day I caught probably around about 15 or 16 of these little blighters. So this is what they can do to a little section. They've got quite a voracious appetite and it takes them no time at all to strip it right back. So a real little pest. We also see a few cluster moth caterpillars on this basil. So I tend to squish them whenever I see them. They've absolutely smashed this plant. I will be spraying the plants in the aquaponics with some dipel, which is a Bacillus thuringiensis spray. Because it is fish friendly and amphibian friendly, reptile, mammal, bird friendly. So I'll be spraying the plants in here to look after these guys and hopefully the magpie moth caterpillars. And we are also seeing a variety of caterpillar, see if I can find one, that makes a little webby nest here on the Brazilian spinach. I think I squished most of them the other day. Here we go, I just found one. They make a little web nest. Just in the leaves, they sort of cocoon themselves in overnight. So these guys here, I need to get these guys under control as well. But in saying that, I did come through here the other day and squished a lot of them on this plant here, and also on the one over the back. Now, the main way I think I can get these guys under control is actually thinning out the Brazilian spinach. I mean, we're eating it every second to third meal here, and we're still not able to consume it all. Mainly because we've also got the warrigal greens, which is another spinach substitute. So I think I need to cut these guys right back and give as much away as I can to family and friends to start off their own patch, and get the dipel in there to knock any that are left on the head. Now I'm just going to give you a bit of a look at a plant that's suffering a bit of a mite outbreak. I've looked after most of it. It's just in here in the veggie pod. This has just got a little bit of extra shade cloth thrown over the top of it at the moment because we had some sun damage to some of the fruit in there. So this is just taking some of the sting out of the summer sun. What we had was a plant that was laying all over the soil, and I came in here and staked it up. And I dare say that when I staked it up, I probably brought some mites into the veggie pot itself, and we started to see some classic mite damage on some of the branches. A lot of the growth tips had curled leaves. I also started to see some bronzing on the stems of the fruit and the fruit itself. So that's pretty much all a good indication I've got mites in here. And you might be able to tell by the holes in the leaves that we've also got something else eating them. There we go, there's one of them just there. They're the little cluster caterpillars. So I dare say what's happened is when I've been in here either staking it up, or I did have the lid off for probably about an hour or two the other day during a rain period. One of the moths has got in here and laid some eggs. I did come through and give everything a good go over the other day, but obviously I've missed a few. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention before, they make this little furry nest. It looks almost like a little bit of brown lint stuck to the leaves. So that's a good indication that you're going to have a few issues. Just found a few more here. So obviously I didn't get them all, so I'm going to have to come through and squish these guys. I'll also spray this with a bit of dipel, I think. But anyway, back to the mites. I decided to leave this branch here and this branch here because they were fairly well mite free by the look of it the other day. But I did notice over here we do have some slightly cupping leaves down there, and down here you can see that this new growth is cupping as well. So I dare say yeah, this needs a good spray. So I'm going to spray these guys with some horticultural oil, and if they're still here in a few weeks time, I'll respray, but with a wettable sulphur to see if that'll knock them on the head. But I do find that cutting a plant right back and getting most of the infected material out and then treating the remainder of the material just gives you a little bit of a head start on the mites. Otherwise it's a bit of an uphill battle if you leave all the material on there and try and kill all the mites that are in residence. So yeah, just a little bit of a look at this plant in here. We have had mites affect other things in the patch as well. We've had spider mites on the kangkong in the aquaponics. We've had broad mites down on the silver beet or the chard a couple of years back. So they're a very nasty little beastie and pretty hard to control. We might just cover these guys back up, give them a bit of protection, and we'll head on down the back and check out the army worms. So yesterday I was down here just measuring out some bits of tin for the side walls on the new chicken coop, and I noticed that underneath my feet the ground looked like it was crawling. We have a number, actually there's one right there. We have a number, and I do mean a number, of these lawn army caterpillars crawling around. There's a little green one just doing its thing over there. Just to give you some idea on the numbers, this isn't anywhere near as there was this morning, but that's just what's trying to crawl up the tin there, the corrugated iron for the chook coop. And there's more down there as well. Luckily these guys don't look like they're too fond of the warrigal greens. We're seeing a few holes in some of the leaves, but most of that is from the grasshoppers we have in there. As you can see, we have quite a lot of warrigal greens at our disposal at the moment. I popped this bit of tin down here yesterday as I can use it to extend one of the walls on the chicken coop, and it was rather hot. And as you can see, it has fried hundreds of little caterpillars all over there. There's a couple of live ones now. It's a bit cooler, making their way over it. But that's just, you know, that's an insane amount of caterpillars. The geckos and lizards down here must be having an absolute field day at the moment with these guys. We'll just go for a bit of a wander over to the back fence to show you a few more. So I've got a couple of these guys crawling around the back fence as well. There's a couple more down in there. And even more on the fence itself. I just couldn't believe it yesterday when I came down, the amount of these guys we have just crawling up the posts and all over the rails of the back fence here. Absolutely everywhere. These guys here look like army lawnworm, which are a real pest. There's actually a plague of them in the southern states at the moment, down in Victoria and Tasmania. So, you know, when I saw them yesterday, I was a bit concerned that maybe it was a little bit of an omen, but apparently they just really do well after a lot of rain, and we have had a fair amount of rain. So I'd say that has spurred the moths on to lay thousands of eggs around the place. Just to give you a look at this rail here, they're absolutely everywhere. Just loads of the little blighters. And luckily enough, they're not interested in any of the turmeric volunteers or the tomato volunteers or the Egyptian green volunteers that have popped up in this bed here. Even the fruit down in here is looking good. There's some broad ripple yellow currant tomatoes, and it looks like we're going to get a decent crop from these guys down in here. So I'm rather relieved that these caterpillars don't find these plants tasty. So yeah, but I'd say I'm speechless, but I've just been yabbering on for about half an hour making this clip. Loads of them. So there you go, there's a bit of a look at some of the pests we have through our patch here in summer, the warmer months. So, you know, in my arsenal, I've got the eco oil for the mites and other horticultural oils. We've got the dipel for the caterpillars. Doesn't work on all forms of caterpillars, and it's not something I'll spray willy-nilly around the patch. It's something I pretty much will just use as a targeted spot spray just to control those fellas in the aquaponics. The army lawn grubs, as much as they look formidable, and just by the sheer number of them down the back, I don't think they're going to really pose a huge issue on our leafy greens around the patch. So yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how long they're going to hang around for. With the grasshoppers on the amaranth behind me here, there's really not a lot we can do. I have heard people say you can spray neem when they're relatively young, and that does control them. Here in Australia though, we're not allowed to use neem. Apparently it's toxic to us Australians. Everyone else in the world, follow your own country's guidelines. I know, I'm fairly sure New Zealand, America, and most places in Europe allow the use of neem on food plants, but here in Australia, we're a bit fragile, so we're not allowed to. No sarcasm there whatsoever. So anyway, I will leave it there. I thought it might interest a few of you folks out there just to see what we're dealing with. I need to send out a huge thank you and g'day to all the marvellous folks who support us over on Patreon, and you can find links to the super contributors in the description down below. I'd also like to thank you all for coming along and continuing to support our channel just by watching the clips. A few people have said that I'm trying to flog Patreon. I'm not really, there's no hard sell. As long as you enjoy the content I'm putting out here to YouTube, giving it a thumbs up and sharing it if you think others will like it, you know, I'm pretty much all happy with that. In saying all that, I'll stop rambling on. I do hope you're all well and happy and your own patches are booming and bug-free, and I'll catch you next clip. Cheers all, have a top one.